Hello and welcome back to another episode of Try Talk. Today with me is my new favorite co-host, Scott Anderson. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the my second episode. Let's get cracking.
Third episode, actually. Second, first one
Yeah,
was as a
well, yeah,
guest.
second as a host.
Today we're going to be doing a short recap of what happened in XTERRA Quebec. This episode is going to be a little bit complicated for us because there was really very little coverage in terms of information of what happened out there. Xterra this time around for this World Cup stop practically didn't even do any Instagram stories. So what we've had to do is I have sent a bunch of voice messages to
You've been pestering
pretty much
athletes
most of
is
the
essentially
athletes.
what you've been doing.
Dude, I know it's been the worst. No, but everybody's been absolutely amazing. Most of the people that I reached out to have had the time to send something through, and I'm very grateful for those who did. So this is kind of a collection of their perspectives on the race. We also kind of did a small gaps analysis so that we kind of see who was where. And I think we can kind of slowly get into the racing with maybe kind of a course preview. And Scott was obviously there. So, Scott, you can take that away.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to mention before we get into anything else is that the field was not as dense in as in any of the other races, which is down to two reasons, I think. One of them is if you look at how the season split up, there are a lot of races right in the beginning, a big block with Greece, the UK, the US, and then there's a big summer break, and then you got Czech, Germany, and Molveno coming up. And right in the middle of that break is XTERRA Canada. And from a training standpoint, it makes sense to use that summer break as a good training block to prepare for the next races coming up. And flying halfway across the world to do a single race, tapering, and then coming back, obviously is not ideal. And then it's, of course, a lot of travel, and it is only one race. Whereas, like in the US, they had a full distance in the short track. So, from a timing perspective and a perspective, money and points available, it doesn't make sense for a lot of people to come. That's why we will see that there was a relatively small field there.
We talked about this
Yeah.
with Anita, I think, at the beginning of the year, where it was very clear that the season really was divided into these kind of two
Yeah.
groups, and there's this one standout in the middle. That being said, I still think that the men's, in terms of like the top 15, was still really quite competitive. For the women, I think maybe top five was still really like girls who are really quite committed to the World Cup, and so the field was really not that bad.
Yeah, like I myself was actually thinking about not racing Canada, and the main reason I ended up doing so was because I missed the race in the UK, and obviously there is no Joker rule, so I had to go and race. But it turns out I think it was a good decision. It was a very pleasant trip. It was actually relatively convenient to go to because the whole race was set at a lake that was about 30 minutes outside of Quebec City. And there is one of the biggest mountain bike parks in North America that is just at this lake. I think they had like 75 kilometers of trails or something. And it was really good to ride. So this trail park was also where the course was set in. We had a loop of, I think it was 16 kilometers through the trails up, trails down. You did that loop twice. And then there was a tough run course, also 2 laps of 5K. And it's hard to describe. For those of you who've been in Molveno, it was very similar to the rocky section through the woods. You had basically 2.5K of uphill through the bushes, through some big rocks. There was like a very small gap that you had to pass through. And then it came back down towards the lake again and went through mountain bike trails. So unlike any other run course, I think, good fun. Yeah,
What
typical.
was the elevation like? Was it a bit
I
flatter
don't
than
know. I
most
don't know a
than other
number
courses?
off the top of my head actually, but it was like constant, steady climb. There was nothing super steep, but it was constantly up and then down at the end again. Yeah.
And so are these long climbs or repeated short ones?
No, it was like one constant climb up with all the obstacles through the woods, etc. And then down a mountain bike single trail down to the lake, past transition, and yeah, back in for the second lap. Um, Yeah, I'm just thinking if there was anything else important about the course, but I think that pretty much covers it.
I think I think what's really important to mention, I kind of having talked to a lot of the people in the top five, it seemed like I didn't talk to somebody like Felix, but it seemed like pretty much everybody was kind of unhappy with their performance.
I have an idea about why that could be.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of fatigue. First of all, because of the season being so far progressed, and also because of the traveling. So, could you tell us about what the traveling was like for you, Scott?
Yeah. So, first of all, about why a lot of people were unhappy about their performance. I think a lot of people that raced there were Europeans, obviously. And European mountain biking, and you'll see that in the courses in Czech and Germany, is a lot about long climbs, fire road climbs, long parts where you can have a steady power output. Whereas the course in Canada was basically constant turns, hairpin bends, little obstacles, and you had to constantly try and accelerate again, brake, try and ride a feature, accelerate again, and it was a lot less of a constant power output. And I think a lot of the Europeans are not used to that. But, and this is a case in point, we saw an incredible bike performance from Ben, which we'll get into later. And Ben, obviously, he's from Australia, so he's a very good mountain biker, so he's used to this kind of riding, and it suits him a bit more. And I think that has to do with expectations that maybe not have met the performance on the day. Yeah, and about the travel, somehow it seems that Air Canada flights to Quebec are cancelled quite a lot. I was supposed to share a hire car with Stevie Neef and Lorena Earl, and when they arrived, the hire car station had literally not a single hire car left because, and we only found this out later, during the entire day, all of the flights to Quebec and from Quebec got cancelled. So people just showed up at the hire car station and the cars were all gone, even though we'd reserved and paid for one. And then a lot of flights on the way out were cancelled. Sebi, Lorena, and me got stuck in Montreal, and I know some other people got delayed too. And yeah, Quebec airport was just not brilliant that time of day.
And how far in advance did most of the people get in? Do you know? Hello,
Um,
Dominic.
yeah, that's so for everyone wondering why
Intruder
Dominic
into
is
the
running, yeah,
podcast.
intruding into the picture. I'm on training camp with Bart and Dominic now, prepping for XTERRA Czech. Most people were there like roughly a week out. I know Ben and Hannah were there a little bit earlier than a week, and then most people arrived either on the Monday or Tuesday. Marta arrived quite late, I think. She was only there for a few days, but she might have included that into your text. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think maybe a good way to start this, because you were in the race and something that we often do with Aneta is let's maybe start with your race perspective. Kind of how did your day go?
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, how does a race day usually start? You get up. We got up at I think 5-ish. Had some breakfast. Had our stuff pre-packed the day before. Do the pre-race toilet run, and then we all went down to the lake. I stayed at a house with Michele, Federico, Hugo, Boscha, Romy Spulder, and Katja Kren. So we all drove down in the cars together, set up transition, had a look at the ways in and out, have a few chats to other people, and just kind of get in the right headspace for the race. And quicker than you usually kind of think it's just the race goes. And yeah, the race for me, the race went not brilliant. The swim was not ideal. But I did eventually find a group to stick with. Zebi Neef was in there, Kieran was in there, who kept punching me throughout the 2 laps, which was horrendous. And he laughed about it after the race. So next time I'll just try and drown him. And then I kind of rode the rest of the bike more or less on my own. But I probably had the best run of this season so far. I managed to catch Steve and Hugo who were in front of me, and then I ended up ninth, which was nice. A few more points for the World Cup standing. But unfortunately, that also means I didn't catch a lot of the racing going on around me because I was alone. So,
So, based on our voice messages, kind of what we know, it seems like there was maybe I'll pull up one of these. So there was a leading duo that seemed to come out first. It was And I want to get their names right. So let me just look at this really
While you look that up,
quickly.
one thing I just thought of, the lake in Quebec, it had the biggest tadpoles I have ever seen in my entire life. I kid you not, they were like half the size of my hand, and they were all over like the edge of the lake. Like you could see them from the pier. It was amazing.
This is the
Random
value
fact,
added.
but
This
yeah,
is why you listen to Try Talk. Anyway, so the leading duo out of the water was Nicholas Harvey, who's quite new to Xterra Racing, a Canadian guy, and Hugo Boscher, who you already mentioned. They actually led out of the water roughly ahead of around a minute, is what Michele said, out of a group with Michele, Felix, and Steve Croucher. Then there was another group of favorites, or kind of the main peloton, containing you. Then there was Sebinev and Kieran and Spinazza also swam in that group. I hope I'm getting all that right. Then
I think Federico was actually somewhere in between the two groups. He was a bit in front of us.
was he between the two groups? That would kind of make
Yeah.
sense. And I think was Ben within your group? No, Ben actually I think was a bit behind your group, right?
Yeah,
Ben
Ben
Forbes.
went off really hard, like he was in front of us for about the
Mhm.
first lap, but then I think he dropped behind a bit. But he wasn't that far behind.
Um, okay, now how do we do the bike? What we're going to say is kind of imagine there's pretty much two or three groups. There's a leading group of Felix and Michele who essentially catch the guys who were out front from the water first, and they go on to kind of dominate the entire race. There's only one person who's kind of really able to switch groups, which who is Ben Forbes. Ben is actually able to bridge from. He has a really good bike split, and he bridges from the end or from the end of a field all the way to the front, and actually comes into T2 with a short little advantage. Then there was a second group, and I'll talk about this kind of main group, which was, yeah, Spinazza was obviously a little bit ahead of these guys, but then there's Kieran, Artur, and Ben, who eventually catches them and passes them. These guys kind of rode together for various short sections at the beginning of the first lap. So it's a 2 lap course. So in the first half of the race, or in the first half of the first lap, Ben catches that group, and Kieran actually is able to tag on to him. He's the only person who's able to hold on. Spinazza gets dropped, and I think Artur probably manages to hold on for a little bit longer, but also gets dropped from that group. So Ben starts bridging to the front, and Kieran actually makes a mistake following Ben. He said that he rode into some sand and crashed himself, which I think actually has a pretty big impact on the race because Kieran's a really good runner. And I think had he obviously not crashed, it would have maybe even put him into a podium spot. What do you think about Kieran? Because we were talking about this off air a little bit,
Yeah, I
his
think.
style of riding.
Yeah, so I think you're more for the facts, so I'll just do some crap talking. With Zebi, Neef, and me, we came up when we were in New Zealand. At his place, we came up with a nickname for him. And you know how every or most Xterra people have kind of an animal as a nickname? Kieran is now the Rackelhahn, which is a German half breed of a bird who shows some weird behavior. If you're into that, you can look that up on the internet. But we found it very fitting because Kieran, yeah, he has a very aggressive riding style. He's always on the limit to the point where Tom Fisher actually told him, like, mate, just back it off 2% and you'll be fine. But somehow he just can't do that. I guess he's too much of a racer. And unfortunately, sometimes that leads to him overdoing it and crashing. I know exactly the part where he crashed. It was after one of the technical downhills, very sandy, and with some like slalom between trees, and then especially on the second lap, it was extremely washed out, and it was easy if you went into hard to have like the front wheel slip off. I guess that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean he didn't share the exact details of the crash, but it seemed hopefully he's fine. But in my opinion, it really did have a big impact on the race. Somebody who we mentioned in the swim was Sebinev. He said he was feeling a lot of fatigue. Kind of, I think he did some. Him and his partner Lorena did some interviews with XTERRA, and I think that that would have probably taken quite a bit of energy, same as the traveling. And he said that maybe there was even some mechanicals with his bike, and so he didn't have a particularly good bike split. And so he's kind of trailing behind these guys.
I think part of the reason that he was fatigued was also just because he did a lot of races before. I talked to him after the race,
Yeah.
and he did Pontevedra, the ITU World Champs, and then the week after Pontevedra, he did a trail ultra marathon close to his home for his one of his sponsors, and then it was just probably too much of racing.
Yeah, so I think I would have expected him to see him a bit further up front, but kind of this amount of fatigue explains what would have happened to him. But in T2, essentially what you have is Ben Forbes with a small margin on Felix Forzier and Michele Bonacina. Michele actually, and this was really surprising to me, has he gets a 15-second penalty for draft or for not getting off his bike in time. He said he didn't see the dismount line, and this is the first time he's gotten this type of a penalty. This was really surprising to me, but I'll get to that in a second. I don't want to get too ahead of myself. And so basically, you have these three guys roughly evenly separated by a couple seconds. What ends up happening, kind of unsurprisingly, is that Felix Forestier goes and just runs away with the victory. He's by far the best guy in the field. But what really, really surprised me was Michele and his run. Michele only lost by, I think, 45 seconds or something to Felix, and riding with him the entire time, plus getting a 15-second penalty. That was something I really didn't expect from him in terms of his run form. Artur comes in relatively close behind him, another 45 seconds. He takes third place. Kieran said him and Artur were yo-yoing on the run for a lot. Kieran also said that he, unlike Artur, actually put on some socks, which may have cost him a couple seconds. I think it would have been really interesting to see the fight between Artur and Kieran on the run had Kieran not crashed, because my money would probably actually be on Kieran to take the run, to be a faster runner, but Artur also has some really fast runs, so hard to say. And somebody who's disappeared out of that conversation, sadly, is Ben Forbes, who I think didn't have a terrible run, but I think doesn't necessarily have the best running legs in general. So he kind of comes fifth, which I think still is a pretty good performance out of him. And one last person before maybe I'll run up the rest of the top 10, who I want to mention really quickly is Nicholas Harvey, who actually ends up coming in for sixth. He kind of had, it seemed like he had mostly a solo race and didn't really ride with anybody, but riding in sixth ahead of Sebinev in seventh place, I think is really impressive. Spinace, who had a pretty good swim, a decent bike, although he was alone for most of it, didn't have a good run. He said he felt kind of out of it. And I think that's also kind of testament to, again, the traveling and all the fatigue that these guys are feeling. And then, yeah, it's you in ninth place, Scott.
Yay!
Great performance, friend of the podcast. And just another shout out to Steve Croucher in 10th. So that's kind of that for the men's race. I think biggest surprise by far was Michele. I don't really know what got into him. He said he felt really fantastic on the run. So really great props to him, and I really hope that he can maybe replicate this level in Czech and in Molveno afterwards. But I think we can kind of move on to the women's race. The women's race for me is even more difficult than the men's to give kind of a rundown of what happened. However, what I can say is there was a group of Emma de Croo and Romy Spödler, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, who seems to came out of swim first. They were roughly, I'd say, a minute, maybe 30 seconds ahead of Marta, who ended up catching him and rode with Emma for, seems like pretty much most of the bike. This, I think, is a pretty good performance from Emma. I think Emma's level on the bike has been really good the last couple years, months, and she's still really impressive in that. Marta did say that she didn't feel particularly great on the bike. Again, another continuation of that fact. And kind of a long story short is Marta just kind of runs away from Emma. Emma is able to hold on to second place. I think it's really nice to see Marta win. I wouldn't expect anything else. Marta's just like a fantastic rider, and I think she is a step above these other girls, but still a really nice result, and I don't want to take away from it at all. Then we have Hannah Lee Young, another friend of the podcast. Everybody's a friend of the podcast, of course, at this point.
Everyone's a friend of Hannah.
Yeah, exactly. She said that she swam with Lorena, and then she kind of ditched her at the beginning of the bike, and she kind of ran in for fifth. She said she had kind of a pretty good run, I would say, probably the second fastest run of the day, which I think is quite nice.
I saw Hannah just on the end of my second lap, and she was running very well. She was very happy, which is, I guess, a good
Mm-hmm.
sign, having a blast running. So
Mm-hmm. And she said that you passed her and told her there was nobody behind her for miles.
yeah, yeah, that's good.
And then Lorena to just kind of round out the top five. Just to list a couple more names, it was Katie Button in sixth, Katja Kren in seventh, and Brittany Schroeder in eighth. But there's not even 10 women in the elite here, which I think was kind of surprising to me. Just kind of goes to show I think the field just wasn't that strong. I think the top five was strong and quite close together, but then once you get past that, it's kind of you know just not too many people kind of showed up.
Yeah, it's always a bit of a shame when there's a small elite field, and it has happened a lot in the elite women's this year, especially because even if you're seventh in a field out of eight, it might not look very spectacular or impressive on paper. But if you had a larger field and more women, and maybe compared it to the age group women even, you'd see that it is still an impressive performance. It just doesn't come across, which I think is unfortunate for these great athletes. But it is.
I think that you can see this with the men's as well. Kind of the quality that you have in the top 10 is quality that you would get in any of the other World Cups very easily. Sure, the very, very cream of the top, meaning Jens and Arthur Sellier, are not here. So kind of Felix feels like has no competition, even though Michele was really surprisingly actually able to push him pretty close on this race. But I still wouldn't put Michele in that category because Felix, Artur, and Jens are just kind of different beasts. But still, I mean, then you go that rank lower, that tier lower, and these guys are really strong and they put in just as much effort. Maybe they just don't get it right on the day, and it just kind of sucks to not have these fields full and complete. And I think it's kind of a pity also that very then aren't given the adequate the adequate marketing, in terms of stories being shown of what happened. And when I talked again, we talked about this off air. When I get a newsletter from Xterra, and the first thing that is mentioned is some sort of trail run, okay. Then the second thing that's mentioned is some youth tour, okay, nice. And then the last thing that's mentioned is the World Cup that just happened, where you have these athletes who put their entire lives on the line, essentially, who gear their entire years to prepare for these races. In my opinion, feels a bit like there could be more work done for these people. And yeah, for them to kind of get the value they deserve. Anyway, that's my opinion. I think we'll maybe talk about this a bit later with Czech, during Prachatice, which is the next race in the calendar, which I think we're all really excited for. Unless I'll finally get to see most of the people we've been talking to and talking about. Yeah, so I think we should talk about the World Cup standings. Let's kind of start with the men's, because we're pretty much mostly done with the season. There's still how many points are there left to distribute? 100, 100, and 240. So 340 points. So I'd say we're maybe 60% done with the season. I don't know exactly how much can change. Looking at I'll just run through the top 10, or the top five. Artur Frazier currently sits in first. He's leading the World Cup with almost 500 points. Michele Bonacina, second place, 470 points. Felix Fourzier right behind Bonacina, 1 point behind him in third. Sebinev, fourth place, 430 points, and Kieran McPherson, 391. So you kind of have three guys who, in my opinion, are currently fighting to actually win the entire World Cup. You have Sebi, who is in fourth, who I think has a chance to move up into third if anything happens to any of the guys in the top three, if any of them miss a race or anything happens. Kieran is in fifth, kind of a bit further down, although similar position to Sebi. And then you have Ben Forbes, who is also quite close, sixth place, 375 points. Federico Spinazza, also quite similar, 340 points. In seventh, Jens, who hasn't partaken in a lot of races, is in eighth, 265. Friend of the podcast, Scott Anderson, in ninth, 225 points. And Sebastian Carabin with 206 in 10th, kind of rounding out the top 10. Scott, what do you think can kind of change within the top 10? Who do you think is in the running for the overall?
So I think in the overall, I would expect to see Felix rise up, I think, because I think he's won every single race he's done this year, right? Or am I missing something? So I would
Except
expect
for
him
except
to.
for the short track in Oak Mountain,
Oh yeah, sure,
where
yeah,
he got
exactly,
beaten by Sullivan. But yeah,
yeah,
pretty much.
true. So I would expect him to show up at the next races because they're easy to get to. They're in Europe. Um,
Mhm.
and he's been the strongest so far. Other than that, I think I would expect to see Arthur at least in the top three, and I think concerning the third place, it could be Michaela. I think Zebi could potentially get back in there. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe Kieran is in contention. Um,
Speaking of riding style, you talked about this. I think that maybe Artur has a similar riding style to Kieran, where it seems to me like he maybe takes a lot of risks because we've seen in years previous that he has crashed out on a lot of, mostly on the Czech course repeatedly. Um, I wouldn't be.
yeah.
I really don't want Artur to crash out. I really don't. But I wouldn't be surprised if any of the guys has something go wrong within one of the races, and somebody who's sitting in fourth or fifth, Kieran or Sebi, are actually able to get onto the podium because of it.
Yeah, I mean we've seen that last year where especially after Czech, a lot changed because people got injured, they missed a race, and obviously, I mean, you just listed the points. You can see that even up to 10th place, it's all relatively close together to the point where missing one race or having a single DNF can change quite a lot. So I think, yeah, like I said, the top three, I expect, if nothing else happens, to be Felix and Arthur, maybe Silvio and Michaela, and then everything that follows after can, yeah, it can really change pretty quickly.
Also, something I've talked about before is the rating disproportionately benefits really high performing. So it's much better to come to free races and win them rather than go to every single one of the Xterra stops and kind of get a top 10 or a top 20.
It prefers,
Because,
or it
yeah,
weights good results higher than consistency.
exactly. So somebody like Artur Sevier is not on the table yet, but there's if he comes to Molveno, wins the short track, or does Czech and wins that, that's 170 points, which puts him almost in the top 10. And for guys like you who kind of try their entire year to go to all of the races and they get like a top 10, that's actually something you have to consider when you're calculating your top 10 rating, is guys who maybe haven't showed up for all the races, like maybe even Jens.
So if you're listening to this, please do not do that.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe let's do the women really quickly. Here it's Alizé Patier is leading the women's, uh, 550 points, 80 points ahead of Marta Mendito. Even after skipping Quebec, she's still 80 points ahead of her. I don't see Alizé's chances of this going anywhere. I think she really should win this.
Which
Same
probably
as
played
Marta.
into the
Marta
decision of not going to Canada in the first
skipping.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Marta should definitely hold on for second. She's 90 points ahead of Hannah Young, who's in third. I think that's really nice for Hannah actually to be in third right now. She has 380 points. Lorena Aero, 333 points. Fourth, Emma de Croo, 327, so quite close to Lorena. Aneta Grabmuller, 306. Romy Spödler in seventh with 294 points. Katie Button with 157. Katja Krenin with 150. And Solène with 150, rounding out the top 10. I imagine Solène will probably come to, okay, prediction time. She'll probably win the world champs again. Not a particularly hot take, I don't think. But so that's another 100 points. So I think she'll probably finish in the top 10 easily. I wonder if Hannah's going to be able to hold on to the top three. I think she could, unless Aneta comes and has like some crazy performances somewhere. That could happen. I think the only person to really threaten Hannah in third is Aneta. She's roughly 70 points behind her. One really good result from Aneta and one bad result from Hannah could flip that. But I would kind of like to see Hannah actually take the podium here because she's gone to every single one of the races, and she's gotten these kind of, I'll read off the rankings: sixth, fifth, 10th, 12th, sixth, seventh, fourth. These are nice results. But it's similar to what we talked about in the men's. If somebody comes in and gets a couple W's on the board, that's a bunch of points that are just really hard to kind of catch up with.
True. And not to forget, the next race we've coming up is XTERRA Czech, which is Aneta's home race. And there's two. There's a full distance and the short track. So yeah, maybe having the home advantage will benefit Aneta in this, and we'll have to circle back on this after XTERRA Czech and Germany potentially to see how the standings have turned out then.
For sure. I think one last thing from us, talking of XTERRA Czech, do we know if Jens and Solène are doing it? I'm not sure.
I have checked the website yesterday to see the start lists. Actually, one more interesting thing about Czech is it is the ETU European Champs as well. So I'm expecting to see some people there, not necessarily a lot, but at least some that will deliver pretty good performances and that are not well known, because there are some people who kind of focus on federation racing and who are not your typical XTERRA contenders.
Kochas, for example. He hasn't
Yeah, but
done
he's
any
well
of the
known,
XTERRA
right? I
racing.
mean,
Yeah, but he hasn't done any of the XTERRA racing, and so he'll be there. And he's somebody people have to kind of expect. And I
let me check
think
the
this
start
will,
list.
because I've already seen him training on the course. I think it'll also benefit the really strong swimmers because the ETU racers, they tend to swim really well. On the bike, they kind of then struggle, and the runs are kind of okay. I don't expect them to kind of push anybody for the victory, though.
Right, so I have just pulled up the men's start list. I'm just scrolling through there. Let's see. Lucas Kocha is registered. Interestingly, you know who's back? Maxime Chanet.
Ooh, he's
Yeah, I've
good.
just seen his name on the start list. I don't think he's raced a single Xterra this year.
No,
Oh,
he
at least
hasn't
not in
because
the World Cup.
he's not in the top 10, is he? But he's in flying form because he was at the Pontevedra World Champs, and he is flying. That guy's on form, so that'll be fun to watch. Do you have a prediction for the winner?
In XTERRA Czech. So far,
Short
I
track
mean,
and long course.
I think on the long course it'll probably be Felix again, right? I think maybe if Jens shows up, he would have something to say about that. He would have possibly won last year's edition if he hadn't received 3 penalties.
Yes.
Um, but you've extensively covered that in another podcast. And on the short track, I would probably expect Felix to win it as well, to be honest. He's been so dominant this year and
No
last year
Artur.
as well.
You don't believe in Artur Strie?
I don't think he's racing.
You don't think he's racing?
I haven't seen him on the start list yet.
Really?
But as I said, I've only seen the ETU start list. The XTERRA, the World Cup start list isn't online. So if Serie
I didn't
shows up,
know.
that would be something else.
I hope he does. I
Yeah.
hope Jens and Artur show up because otherwise, Kochar is going to be there to kind of race with Felix.
Fair enough. True, true. I think he, especially in the short track, he would have a word about the podium. Does that make sense?
I think I'll pick. I don't know who's doing it, honestly. I'm going to pick Lukáš Kočar for the long course because I like a dark horse and I want Lukáš to win. And I hope, and he has to win by riding smart. Please do not pull any big groups with people behind you, Lukáš. Please don't do it. Please don't do it. And then for the short track, I'll go for Jens. In terms of the women's, Alize is quite an easy person to pick, I think. I think it suits her much better, the long course. And I'll go for Aneta for the short course. I think she can, because Aneta, I think, struggles with the run still. That's definitely her weakest discipline. She'll have a good gap out of the swim. Because of the ITU people, she'll have people to swim with. Then on the bike, she's really strong on the bike, so she can kind of hold off on the bike. And then on the run, she'll just have to hold on. And I hope that she can hold on.
Fair enough. Not long until we shall find out. There's a live stream for the short track, so you should definitely check out that.
Yes, you should absolutely check out the live stream for the short track. Look for me yelling at the riders somewhere.
We should come up with something for you to wear on race day so people can spot you in the live stream. Like
I was thinking if I should get merch for myself. Try talking.
Merch for yourself. I was kind of thinking like a yellow fisherman's coat or something.
I have
like
one of those.
Yeah.
I have one of those, but it's going to be like 36 degrees.
Costume or something. That would be pretty sick.
It's going to be like 36 degrees. And whenever I spectate races, I take spectating very seriously. And I just go from one part of the course and I run 4-minute Ks to the other one immediately. Jump over children.
You should record that on Strava.
It's like a professional stream. I think I did, actually. I think I recorded I think during Moveno, I was stuck up on one of the hilltops and I ran like a 12-minute free K down the hill to go see the finish line.
So it's okay, I have another proposal. Maybe you wear Speedos and like a very funny big hat. They'll protect you from the sun and be cool.
It's
and
also
you would
indecent.
Definitely stand out, yeah.
It would stand out on Czech national television.
Yeah, yeah, true. You should strategically position yourself close to the cameras then. But if anybody has some good suggestion of what Ollie should wear, send the podcast. Yeah, the podcast has an IG profile, right? Send them a DM.
Yeah, we have an Instagram profile.
Maybe you can make an Instagram poll and a story, and we'll come up with the best outfit for you on race day.
I might have to do that. Okay. Well, that's all from us. Thank you very much for listening. If you have anything, please send us, I guess not an email because we don't have an email address. Send us a message on Instagram. Tell me what I'm supposed to wear. I may or may not end up wearing it. And that's all from us. Ciao, ciao.